Number 7. Smriti Saxena. Hawaii Island police came upon human remains on a remote beach near Anaheau-Omalu Bay in the district of South Kohola on the morning of February the 19th of 2020. The previous night, 41-year-old Smriti Saxena had been reported missing by her husband, Google product manager Sonam Saxena. The latter told local police that he'd gone back to the Waikoloa Beach Marriott Resort. Prior to Smriti's disappearance, the couple had been staying at the resort with their 2 children, and Sonam reportedly went to retrieve his wife's asthma inhaler. Sonam claimed that when he returned to her location on the southern shoreline, she was nowhere to be found. The authorities quickly determined that the remains found on the beach did in fact belong to Smriti, and an autopsy subsequently indicated that the woman's death had been caused by homicidal violence of undetermined means. In the immediate aftermath, the victim's husband was arrested on suspicion of having committed the murder himself. 48 hours later, however, Sonam was released pending further investigation. As of the latest updates on the case, Hawaii police were still pursuing various leads as to who might have been responsible for Smriti's death. Number 6. Alex Waith. The island of Koh Phangan in southern Thailand has become well known for regularly hosting full moon parties, all-night beach raves that are held before, after, or on the night of every full moon. The monthly events, which feature live music, alcohol, buckets, and readily accessible drugs, attract crowds of approximately 30,000 people on average. In March of 2014, British man Alex Waith traveled to Thailand to undergo an operation on his receding hairline. As the property developer from West Sussex had detailed in a social media post that he'd made prior to his trip, he also planned on attending a full moon party, which was scheduled to take place on the 16th of the month. Shortly after attending the overnight event, it emerged that 29-year-old Waith had drowned. At about 6 a.m. in the morning that followed, he'd reportedly gone swimming at Hard Rin Beach, where he was fatally swept up in a riptide. In the wake of the incident, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office confirmed that the UK government was aware of Waith's death and that they'd contacted his family to inform them of the tragic circumstances. Number 5. Isabella Hellman. A newlywed couple from Delray Beach, Florida was involved in a boating accident during their honeymoon to the Bahamas on the night of May the 14th of 2017. According to subsequent reports, Isabella Hellman and her husband Lewis Bennett had been at sea on a 37-foot catamaran near the Bahamian island of Casal when the vessel suddenly struck an unknown object and capsized. The crash caused Hellman to become lost at sea, while Bennett, who'd reportedly been asleep beneath the deck at the time of the collision, alerted the US Coast Guard via an emergency radio transmission. Bennett was later found floating in a life raft by members of the Coast Guard, who airlifted him to Marathon, Florida. A few months later, US officials levied federal charges against the man, alleging that back in 2016 he'd stolen thousands of dollars worth of gold and silver coins from a Coast Guard vessel in Saint Martin. Following Bennett's arrest, it also emerged that he was being investigated by the FBI for possibly being involved in his wife's disappearance. Federal investigators had determined that the portholes below the waterline had been opened, and that the damage done to the twin hulls had been dealt from the inside of the boat, not by way of a collision with an object, as Bennett had maintained. Although Hellman's body was never recovered, the authorities ultimately identified her husband as being responsible for her disappearance and presumed death. He pleaded guilty to a charge of involuntary manslaughter, and in May of 2019 was consequently sentenced to 8 years in prison. Number 4. Bakari Henderson. On the night of July the 6th of 2017, aspiring fashion designer Bakari Henderson accompanied his friends to a bar in Laganas on the Greek island of Zakynthos. The 22-year-old, who had recently graduated from the University of Arizona in Tucson, had gone to the Ionian island in order to conduct a photo shoot, which he reportedly intended to use towards launching his fashion line. According to initial reports, shortly after their arrival at the bar, Henderson and one of his friends absent-mindedly set down their drinks at the end of a table that was already occupied by another group of patrons. They allegedly took offense and perceived the gesture as a show of disrespect by the American tourists. They then shattered the 2 young men's drinks and threatened to use the broken bottles as weapons. A security guard subsequently approached the scene of the escalating altercation and began shouting at Henderson and the others to calm down. As captured by the bar's security cameras, Henderson then punched the security guard, triggering a brawl that prompted the American to flee. The attackers pursued him outside the bar and proceeded to beat him unconscious. Henderson was taken to a nearby hospital, but he was subsequently pronounced dead on arrival. In the incident's aftermath, an alternate version of the events was detailed in various reports, whereupon it emerged that the fight had actually been provoked after a waitress had taken a selfie with Henderson. The conflict reportedly had to do with the fashion designer's race, as some of the bar's patrons questioned why the woman had chosen to take a photo with a black guy. That aspect led to the physical altercation seen in the CCTV footage. 9 individuals were arrested, including the security guard, a bouncer, and a bartender. 6 of them were initially charged with intentional homicide, but ultimately convicted on lesser assault charges. Appalled by what they'd considered to be unacceptably lenient sentences, Greek prosecutors asked for a retrial on the same intentional homicide charges, which was scheduled to take place in early 2022. Number 3. Holly Given and Richard Bader Tamilty. Florida man Richard Bader Tamilty didn't respond to his mother's messages on December the 20th of 2017, prompting her to check on him at his Singer Island apartment at about 3 o'clock that afternoon. Upon her arrival, the woman discovered that both her son and his girlfriend, 26-year-old Holly Given, had been fatally shot. After reportedly finding their bodies on the bathroom floor, she contacted Riviera Beach police. Neighbors who lived downstairs from the couple told investigators that they'd heard 2 gunshots ring out in the apartment complex at some point during the previous night. After analyzing the crime scene and soliciting testimony from witnesses, the authorities determined that Bader Tamilty had murdered his girlfriend before taking his own life. While the police detailed that there had been no documented history of domestic violence between the couple, neighbors reported palpable tension between Bader Tamilty and Given in the days leading up to their deaths. One nearby resident revealed that they'd seen the young woman leaving the apartment with her belongings the day before the deadly incident, an aspect that led the police to suspect that she might have been planning to move out. According to Bader Tamilty's mother, both he and Given owned multiple guns, and there were reportedly a total of 8 firearms in the apartment at the time of the shooting. Number 2. David Miller and Hannah Witheridge. In the early morning hours of September the 15th of 2014, a pair of British backpackers were brutally murdered on Sairee Beach on the Thai island of Koh Tao. The 2 victims, identified as students David Miller and Hannah Witheridge, had arrived on the island separately in late August and reportedly met while staying at the same hotel, the Ocean View Bungalows. They'd last been seen on the night of September the 14th when they'd attended a party at a local bar with roughly 50 other people, most of whom were reported as foreign tourists. At about 1 a.m., Miller and Witheridge left the bar together, and a few hours later their bodies were discovered by a mute Burmese beach cleaner approximately 100 feet from the Ocean View Bungalows. Autopsies revealed that the victims had suffered multiple injuries prior to their deaths. Both Miller and Witheridge had reportedly been struck in the head with a blunt object, while the former also had water in his lungs, indicating that he'd been drowned. Witheridge's body showed signs that she'd been abused, which was supported by the presence of a used contraceptive device at the crime scene. Thai authorities became concerned that the killings would negatively affect tourism to the island. Local police were therefore pressured to produce the results of the investigation rapidly, which in turn led to various individuals being identified as suspects without clear evidence. 2 weeks after the bodies had been found, investigators brought a pair of illegal Burmese migrant workers in for questioning. Following the hours-long interrogation that ensued, the suspects allegedly confessed to committing the murders. However, the 2 men subsequently accused Thai police of beating them, leaving them naked in a freezing room, and threatening to kill them if they didn't admit their supposed guilt. Despite the allegations that the confessions had been made under duress, the 2 suspects were put on trial in July of 2015. A few months later, they were convicted of murdering Miller and Witheridge and were consequently sentenced to death. In 2020, a royal decree issued by Thai King Vajiralongkorn commuted their sentences to life imprisonment. The handling of the investigation, as well as the criminal trial that ultimately led to the suspects' convictions, became the targets of widespread criticism by international media outlets. Among the most egregious matters surrounding the case was also the absence of legal counsel prior to the migrant workers' confessions. Several legal experts and human rights organizations have called for the guilty verdict to be reviewed in a transparent and fair appeal process. In the years following the killings, other British tourists have been found dead on Koh Tao, leading to it be labeled Death Island by a number of British tabloids. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below, or follow us on Instagram and reach out to us there. Number 1. Christina Marion Annesley. On January the 21st of 2015, 4 months after the infamous murders of David Miller and Hannah Witheridge, a New Zealand-born backpacker was found dead in the Koh Tao bungalow where she'd been staying. 23-year-old Christina Marion Annesley, who'd lived most of her life in London, was only a few weeks into a planned 4-month vacation that was supposed to include other parts of Southeast Asia as well as Australia. The young woman, an aspiring writer and journalist, had reportedly started taking antibiotics for a chest infection shortly before her death, and initial reports suggested that she died of natural causes. It later emerged, however, that Thai authorities had left her body in a temple for days before a post-mortem examination had been performed. It was subsequently determined that Annesley's death had been caused by mixing alcohol with prescription medications. Much like the earlier case involving Miller and Witheridge, Annesley's loved ones began to suspect that Thai police hadn't conducted a proper investigation into her death, and that there was more to the story than the official report suggested. The young woman's father, Boyne Annesley, got in contact with Suzanne Buchanan, a British journalist who lived in Thailand. The latter has publicly claimed that the legal system in Koh Tao is corrupt, and that the authorities on the island are beholden to the Tuachean family, which she likened to the mafia. Buchanan suspected that the Tuachean family was behind several of the deadly incidents involving British backpackers on Koh Tao. Although the Tuacheans have outright denied the allegations, Buchanan and others who shared her views on the subject believed that Thai police were involved in an elaborate conspiracy to cover up the powerful family's crimes. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be stuck on a deserted island for a week or have to sit next to your worst enemy on a red-eye flight? Let us know in the comments section below.